Good afternoon. My name is John Shafer. I am a professor in communication and media. I am currently serving as the coordinator of the communication program and the broadcast cinema program. I teach courses in film study, film production. I also teach television production, advanced media production, and media literacy, and sometimes I teach philosophy. So I also have dabbled in the philosophy department, although currently I've shifted it back over to full-time in the communications area. I had my interest in media at a very young age, and when I was like 10 years old, I had a film camera and I was making films, and I even got to the point where I was showing those in my elementary school, and it was quite a novelty at the time that no other elementary school kids had ever made films before, so I got a lot of attention out of that, and that just stimulated me to want to keep pursuing that direction. Although by the time I got to college, I was considering other options, and I should add that I had a strong interest in theater when I was in high school, and I participated in theater myself. But I kind of, even though I had been very successful in theater, I liked the idea of being behind the camera, partly because I was really interested in the creative side of it. And I realized that it was the people behind the camera that were the ones making the decisions. So I pursued those interests. But when I was in college, I also became very interested in a broad variety of humanities and arts areas. And I ended up actually pursuing a major in kind of humanities in general, which allowed me to pursue interest in film and theater and literature. And ultimately, I realized that all of these are interrelated, because they're all related to storytelling and expression that are all very much a part of media today. And so I've kind of, in my career, I've gone in and out of these various areas. And I did ultimately go to film school for graduate study at Syracuse University. I was at the University of Southern California, USC, in Los Angeles for my undergraduate, and I had the great opportunity to take film classes with top people in Hollywood and benefit from that. And then I did actually, after I graduated from grad school, I was able to be successful in, or not, well, I wouldn't say successful. I was able to dabble in the film industry. I worked in the film industry for a while. I worked in advertising. I was got into the independent production realm, and I was able to produce films in a variety of ways. I was working in television a little bit, and was successfully producing an award-winning children's television program, which actually won several awards. And worked in the film industry a little bit. Worked in music videos, a bit of music video with Sting. So I was able to do all kinds of a variety of media work, to the point where I was able to experience that. And ultimately it led me to come back to teaching, though, because it's hard when you're working as an independent to make a living. And I will definitely say that one of the challenges in media is that if you don't have a full-time job working in it, it's a little tricky to get one. If you want to have some creative freedom, you're working kind of independently. Even working in television and film is not a guaranteed job, unless you get on a regular show that's on and you have that employment. But you know what? When the show is canceled, ultimately, you're out of a job. So that there is a little risk in media in terms of reliability, if you like the high level glamour and star kind of clusters. So that was something I realized, and so ultimately one of the reasons I wanted to get into teaching was because I had a master's degree, I was able to do that. It allowed me flexibility to actually continue creative and production work during the summers, and then but I also discovered that I love teaching. So, fortunately, we've been able to apply that to our programs here, and we've actually gained the reputation of being one of the best media communication programs in the state, and even in the larger New England region. So, and I think part of it is because we have a staff of excellent people, award-winning production people who all share a love of teaching, that we want to apply our creativity but maintain that at the same time. I don't know if I've answered all the questions that I was supposed to here, but hopefully that gives a good start, and I'll pass it on to Rick Harrison.
All right. Here. So let's see, a history maybe, where I kind of came from. I actually didn't go to school. I always like telling that story. I didn't go to school for digital arts, which is funny because that sort of dates me. The only digital arts sort of that was kind of happening at that stage of the game. I mean, yes, computers were around. I don't want to date myself that much. But I actually went to school for broadcast and film. And that was my focus. I was going to maybe be more of a John. I was thinking, okay, I want to do the film production sort of gig, and that was the focus going through school. I didn't actually even touch a computer realistically in school until, let's say a quarter slot on it or something like that. I sort of remember typing papers with a typewriter, so that does date me a little bit. But basically, so how did I arrive at teaching, and where did I, how did I get to what I was doing? Actually, I left school, and I felt as though I wanted to do the freelance gig. I wanted to freelance produce and or direct, or just basically broadcast or film. But in order for me to do that, I actually needed my own setup, my equipment. I was going to do it myself. And so one of the pieces of equipment that I actually needed was I needed a computer. I needed to be able to do titling. I needed to be able to do minimal animation. And so it was part of my background, but I really didn't study it. Although over the span of a year or so, I sort of closeted myself up, and I didn't do the traditional educational route. In terms of that, and I really started to fall in love as I was doing these freelance projects. I fell in love with animating and actually doing things on this, this little computer at the time that I had. About a year and a half, I was able to actually produce what I would think was the most ridiculous demo reel. I fused that with a little bit of my educational background, which probably the most important piece was an internship. I spent a couple months working at a stop-motion animation company up in Massachusetts. And so I actually did work on the intros to some, basically TV shows that are not around right now, but when Fox was very young, a couple of shows there I did animated opens. And I did a lot of MTV and Nickelodeon promotional spots at that company. So I peppered my demo reel had some of that, which was nice. And again, the strength of an internship, I cannot echo that enough. With the things that I was learning in terms of digital. And from there, I actually managed to network. I knew someone who knew someone in ABC, or at that point in time, it was ESPN. And I did the name dropping thing and sent along the demo reel and so forth and pulled an interview. Jumped into doing sports graphics and animation, and it was I have to admit, it was very McDonald's. Once you got past the first 2 weeks of churning out graphics, and so it was heavy graphic design for the screen. During that time, after that 3 weeks of wow, look at my artwork on TV, and isn't that great? It became a job, and it was a good job. I think my hours at the start were probably 11 in the evening until about 7 a.m. So it was the great shift. But during that time, I like to bring up the fact that during that time, that was when I did what I believe is very important for anybody in the creative production field to do. I was in a McDonald's situation. I was churning out graphics. It was fun and all that. But during that time, I was also realizing, hey, there's some great equipment that I'm surrounded by. And so I started playing and exploring and doing things that were beyond what I was being asked to do within my regular job role. So I figure out how, let's say, a specific device would be able to animate. Nobody was animating with let's say, the device we were using. So from 3 a.m. until 6 a.m. while I was waiting for them to ask me to call up a graphic, I was building silly little things and learning the technology, or taking it apart, as I like to think. And that actually is really, I want to stress that was probably the biggest lead to the fact that I then was sort of discovered. I know that sounds silly, but producers were coming in the morning and saying, geez, who's making those silly little graphics that are waving? And, because I knew the people that were coming in the morning. And so just through this fun play and discovery type of thing, I had already had that kind of as my background. They were immediately like, who's doing this, and why isn't this not actually in our sports center or our NFL Today? And they wanted them to work with me. And so I immediately got pulled off the McDonald's graphic gig, and I was now actually starting to work with producers, coming up with concepts and designing animation and so forth. And that actual, I really have to echo that in terms of the traditional career path in digital arts or digital production, media production, I'm not so sure there is you could get a traditional, there's a traditional path. Maybe you could, let's say there's a mobile gaming company and they need someone to actually design the front end, the characters, the artwork, and so forth. But realistically, that's going to change after a month or two. There's going to be another sort of assignment that is not the same. So after building animation and graphics for the live shows in the evening, I was then transferred over into starting to deal with the tech guys or gals who were programming all the data coming from NASCAR and all the cars, and they needed someone who understood graphics and also understood how to deal with the technology in terms of just what computer data that these external companies were dealing with. And so now I found myself flying off to various different locales to manage the graphic systems and design the graphics that folks again were seeing, but it had a lot more to do with the fact that I could talk the data. And so there were these opportunities while I was in the career, first designing graphics, but then I would see an opportunity and I would say, let me try that. Let me actually explore that piece of technology or that piece of technology. And I think that that's really critical when you're in media production. You really do need to show and continue to show the evolution of your actual skill set. And that may actually not just be in graphics and design, but that is, do you understand audio? Do you understand how to take the graphics and the audio and move it and animate it? Do you then know how to take that and then actually churn that into video that actually can be streamed or uploaded? And now you're dealing with all these technologies that keep changing every 6 months to a year. And I think that that's probably the most important recommendation that I could give someone who is, let's say, going down the path of digital arts or media production environment, and that is that it is so not static. You need core design fundamentals. You need to understand what makes something look good, sound good, from a design and production aspect, and then you need to realize that if you take a class in a particular piece of software or something along those lines, that's definitely going to be changing within 6 months to a year, and now there's something new that you have to actually adapt to. And that's a very important piece of the puzzle, that motivation, that creative drive to continue that. Your education will so not stop. Again, I don't know if that was a little glimpse into it. So self-motivation within the field of digital arts and media production is probably one of the key things. I'll pass the mic on.
I'm the broadcast cinema coordinator, but I'm on leave from that position for another year while the college is undergoing a transformation, or programs are undergoing a transformation with a $2.5 million grant called the Center for New Media. So I'm the director of that and running that project. Right now we've just recently in the last week gotten both approval for construction and approval today on all of our equipment. About $1.4 million worth of construction and equipment. for new studios, labs. We've already done classrooms. That's been done. We're going to have an additional classroom television studio. You can see the pictures over there. I can pass this around, give you an idea of what it'll look like. We're going to be transforming the basement of Chapman Hall next to our friends in the ODD department. So that's kind of my job now for the next year and a half or so. As we undergo this change, we'll be updating everything from curriculum to transfer articulations to equipment to facilities. So my background is actually like John and Rick. I went to Ithaca College and had a major in television, radio, and film, and was very much, I wasn't so much a film person, but I liked to play with electronic stuff. So I was video, was my thing, and really enjoyed that. Enjoyed my experience there, and we had a cable television station that went live 2 days a week. So I got some familiarity with field production a little bit, but mostly live studio production at the time. So I got that experience, and then I did internships. One was at a corporation. It was actually a really cool job I had, making training videos on forklifts. Sounds boring, but it was fun. And then I also did an internship and worked part-time at a local television station, WENY, Weenie 36 in Elmira, New York, an ABC affiliate. So I had gained some experience in affiliate television production. So that was fun. I did a lot of technical work there. And then it was time to graduate and come home. I stayed an extra 3-4 months there, worked at Weenie, worked at this forklift corporation, and doing both corporate videos and broadcasting, and came home, didn't have a job. So I decided my grandfather had passed away and left me $1,000, and that was about enough money then to get a master's degree. So I got myself a master's degree. Yeah, yeah, times have changed. The cost of education's gone up quite a bit in the last 25, 30 years. So got my master's degree, and at the same time was continuing working as doing freelance work for companies, freelance work at for television affiliates, so which was always fun. And but the problem was I was looking for that full-time job. So it was either get a job at Channel 3, Channel 8, Channel 30, ESPN, and I had the opportunity. My cousin was at ESPN. He was one of the first people to work there, and was begging me to work there because nobody wanted to work there, because who would ever watch 24 hours worth of sports, was the thought at the time. How could there be that much sports? Now we don't think of it, but then it was quite an odd idea. So he was begging me to work there, because, and I probably should have done that. It's probably one of the things that I regret doing, just to have that experience at a startup and a place that, Rick wasn't there much after that. And so it would have been a good experience. But in looking for full-time work, I had some options. One was education. So I got my first full-time job at Quinnipiac University. It used to be Quinnipiac College. It was a little tiny, little itty-bitty college here in Hampton. Very small at the time. And I worked there for a year, and then I was hired, just one of those lucky incidents where I was applying for jobs, and I was actually flown around the country to different places, because now I had some experience under my belt down in New Orleans and Myrtle Beach, some really nice places to live. And happened to be offered a job here in Middletown. I sent a resume, somebody saw it, somebody else saw it, I didn't know anybody, and they were building a new television facility here in Middletown. Aetna was. And it was a $200 million building. The video communications part of that was $30 million. So it was auditorium, studios, all kinds of really cool equipment. As Rick was saying, really high-end. The insurance business was rolling in dough at that time. And they hired me to design the systems there. I had done some work at, when I was in college at Weenie as an engineer, and they said, oh, could you design us television systems? I'm thinking, yeah, I could do that. So I spent the first 2 years designing the television facilities, which kind of makes me sort of qualified for what I'm doing here now. And dealing with construction people as well as all the equipment and the engineers, and some of those people I'm still working with now on this project, which is kind of interesting. Because business doesn't change all that much over the years. So I did that for 2 years, and then they rolled my job into being a media producer. So I got to produce corporate videos, 9 to 5, with 5 weeks off during the summer, which is pretty good whenever I wanted to take it. So it was a pretty good 9 to 5 gig. I wasn't independent anymore, and I worked with a bunch of creative companies. And one of my jobs was hiring interns, and I read an article in the paper about John Shafer getting a position here at the college. He and a weatherman named Bruce Avery were building this new program here, the Broadcast Communications Program. So I called John up, met John. John came over to Ed and I, came over there, and we started this relationship, and I found that interns from Middlesex were better than some of the interns I was hiring. Most of them were better than the interns I was hiring from Syracuse. So I became involved with the college, and when John took a sabbatical, I happened to they wiped out the communication department at Aetna, and I happened to fall into taking John's position while he was on sabbatical, and kept that position for 20 years. So that's where I am now. So when I'm not doing this, I'm teaching many of the courses John mentioned: television production, media literacy, mass comm, and all that.
Yeah, so I teach nothing here, and I took no one's job here, and my academic background is here, though, and so I did 2 years at Middlesex after becoming interested in television in high school. I spent my first 2 years not doing homework and making little stop-motion animations with MS Paint and Windows Movie Maker, and then transferred that into my junior and senior year. The high school I went to ran the public access station for Middlesex County, and so I started getting homework that I actually wanted to do and just ignoring the homework I didn't want to do, and then I just started skipping classes and only doing television. So came to college where I got to do only television, which seemed to be a good fit, and I think one of the best things here is just the opportunities. Opportunities to learn are so vital, and it's still taking them to this day, paying hundreds of dollars a person to go to classes with different big people in the industry to continue to learn and to continue to understand and make connections is opportunity is such a key. And just being here, you can make whatever you want out of it. You can go through these, especially in a field like this, you can go through these classes and just kind of do the minimal amount and just kind of attend class when you need to, but it's really like the outside of class time that's so vital. And I remember coming in, there'd be maybe 3, maybe 4 of us that would actually stay and paint the backdrop for the studio and work on graphics for the show that we would be producing off hours, off time. And you kind of see where the people that put in the extra time ended up, and the people that just kind of followed just the structure, you end up in kind of 2 different places. So from here, Patience is still here, the assistant news director at Channel 3, helped me with an internship at Channel 3, which rolled into I did for 6 months, rolled into a job for 6 months, and I also was doing 1 or 2 a.m. to 9 a.m., which is really fantastic and ideal time to be working and not sleeping. Definitely preferred that. So I switched to Fox Connecticut News for a year, where I also worked instead of sleeping during the night. And again, that wasn't quite what I wanted to do. But what it did open up for me during the day was to also not sleep and work on things that I wanted to do. So I was able to freelance and worked on some commercials for AT&T, for Nissan, for some big brands that shot during the day, and then I'd go not sleep at night. About 6 months into my time there, I have a good friend in Rhode Island who is the lead editor at a video production company, and they do just really cool stuff for great brands, very storyteller-oriented, for everyone from Brisk Iced Tea to Staples. And so I went out there and I'd spend the day working there, and I would then sleep on the couch there for a little while, and then I'd drive to Hartford from Westerly, Rhode Island, and I would also then not sleep in Hartford in work, and then I'd stop at my apartment and sleep for a second, and then go and kind of do that. So really the key is to just not sleep and utilize all 24 hours of your day for that. So from there, I realized that Rhode Island wasn't where I wanted to live, but I also didn't want to work in news, to be creative, to kind of be on the edge, to learn new processes every day as new plugins for your editing suites come out, or the new cloud now, you're constantly getting updates. It's just so exciting, and not to just be stuck into a procedure. So I decided that I just wanted to do only the things I wanted to do. So I started my own company, and that worked out pretty terribly to start with. I ended up spending a lot of time looking at other companies that would maybe hire me, or twiddling my thumbs, or I was sleeping at that point, which was good. Maybe that's why things were slow. And then eventually, my now fiance got in a car accident, and it was on the way to an internship, and she hit a doctor at Connecticut Children's Medical Center. And she's crying, and the doctor's comforting her, and she says, I'm on my way to an internship. She says, oh, that's all right, give me your resume. And all right, so then she gets brought on at at Connecticut Children's Medical Center part-time, hiring sponsors, or finding sponsors for their field day for the children, called Cycle of Life over the summer. And she said, well, you have a company, you must have so much money to be able to sponsor this. And I said, similar to so much money, I have no money, but I would do some free video production work. And I did that, and several weeks later was contacted by an ad agency in Hartford, and they said, hey, we saw your video, and we're really looking to expand our video offerings, and we need to talk to you. Can you do a commercial for $500? And I said, that is an amazing amount of money. Absolutely, I will work forever for that amount of money. And so I did, and that worked out really well. It was just for this small, just ran on like one station, maybe, I don't even remember. And from that, 2 weeks later, they called me again, and we started doing the commercials for University of Connecticut, the Huskies women's and men's basketball. Go Huskies, national champions, both of them, awesome. And Middlesex, go Middlesex. So that's it kind of rolled into just being in the right place at the right time sometimes, but you need to put yourself there. And you need to reach out and make connections and see what you can do, and don't be afraid to just do things for free and go above and beyond. And especially, I mean, I did so much more than $500 worth of work on that amount, and I paid people to come and work with me, and I bribed people to come and work with me, and I begged people to come and work with me, and I put together a crew, and I found a camera that I had, it wasn't fantastic, and it just kind of all came together, which was awesome. So it's really about putting yourself out there and doing what you love and what you want to do, and you're going to do good at what you're passionate about. So in terms of a traditional career path, I think kind of like everyone's been saying, no one's had the same route. They're really, the traditional career path of someone in video production or in this industry is the untraditional path. That's just what it is. You can kind of choose your own way, but at Middlesex, I got opportunity to learn. There's so many people that are so successful in this without typical training, but they many times are just beating themselves against a computer to just learn and try and figure out, when here they're just like, we have the information and we're just handing it to you, just please take it, just please learn. And if someone is begging you to learn, begging you to understand, begging you to do homework that's actually interesting, what better opportunity is that than here at Middlesex?
Hi group, I'm Donna Bontatibus. I'm a professor of English here at Middlesex, and I'm also chair of the Humanities Arts Division at Middlesex as well. So I have the opportunity of working with the faculty on this panel, which has been my pleasure to do. One of the things you've probably noticed thus far is with the 4 panelists that we've had, they have tremendously sharp communication skills. They can articulate an idea and do it absolutely beautifully, and that falls into my domain, but obviously it connects with their domain as well. That is, my area is English, and that's what I went to school for. Unlike my colleagues here, I actually took more of a traditional road through college. When I was in high school, one of the subjects that really stood out to me that I absolutely loved was English. I loved going to my English classes. Even more, I loved going to my literature classes, and at that time, because it was a relatively small high school, public speaking fell within English, which it does within some disciplines, as does magazine writing and a few other things. This goes back a few years. So while I certainly worked with my career counselors and things like that, I did it in high school, and I certainly did it throughout my 4 years of undergraduate at Albertus, where I majored in English, I still couldn't come out with a job that I really wanted to do other than something that was directly connected with my major, which was English. As I said, I loved it. And while I went to college not 100% knowing what I wanted to do for a career, I went in 100% knowing that I wanted to major in English, and that's what my focus was. So when I first entered my college classrooms, particularly English classrooms, whether it was the composition classes I had to take or even literature, that was it. The decision was made at that point for me. And I know I had to stay as an educator in English, but even more so it had to be at the college level. To me, it was the ultimate. But I did get some good career advice along the way just to make sure that I stayed focused. So even when I graduated from my four-year institution, I knew if I wanted to do anything a little farther along, I had to stay in education. That was to go on for a master's, and then after that I went a little higher with a PhD. But I stayed with English. So for me, it really just came out of a love and desire for the many things that I enjoyed related to reading and writing and anything connected to it. One of the things that I found very helpful, though, my senior year of college, was I did an internship like my colleagues here. The internship that I did was actually in magazine writing, and I loved it. It was at a local magazine out of New Haven at the time, and I just loved it. It was my first real experience taking some of the skills that I learned in the classroom and transforming them to the place of work, and what a better form for me was magazine writing. And at that time, I was actually considering it rather seriously. And what I was doing at the internship was, I forgot exactly what it was called. The magazine had a series of columns, and nothing elaborate. People from the area would send in accomplishments of the local business community members or universities or colleges, and I would write up these accomplishments in sort of like a report form. And I just enjoyed it. However, something really triggered a change in my mind in terms of direction that senior year, and that's when the internship site closed down. Unfortunately, the magazine couldn't sustain itself, which was a reality in the magazine industry at that time. And it's also a reality that the magazine industry still grapples today, unless you're a really strong magazine that's been around for a while and has a heck of a lot of funding. It was something that allowed me to change my mind and say, okay, I knew from that day on I really needed to stay in teaching and education, and that's when I went on to grad school. And I focused specifically in English composition studies, and then literature was in American studies. But in terms of occupations, things that you might want to consider if you do have a love of the English language or anything related to it, there are occupations that you can go into and make a lifelong dream from it. One that we often see commonly associated with it, of course, is education. And education happens on many levels. I have the good fortune of working at a college and being able to use my skills at this level, but there's really all educational levels. A common one for English disciplines would be grades 7 through 12, if that was something that you wanted to get certification in. In the state of Connecticut, there are a few different roads to get certified as a public school teacher, and one is to take a program of study that's dictated in your graduate institutions, but also take a praxis exam and then an area of specialization. And that area of specialization would be predominantly in English, and that would give you the opportunity to teach, grades 7 through 12. And that's where you could really fine-tune and concentrate on English, different types of literature and writing, and that particular focus. There's other areas in education you could get certification for as well, but that would be one you might want to consider. In terms of outlook, I think nationwide, I remember reading, and each site I go to has a slightly different statistic. It was about a 6% job growth rate from 2012 to 2020. Not quite sure what Connecticut stands in terms of that scenario, but it's considered a little slower simply because of the state of where education is. But it doesn't mean good teachers are not needed, and they absolutely are, and it's imperative for us to educate our young students. But education's not the only road. As what's been mentioned already, publishing is a wonderful industry to go into, whether it's book publishing, magazine publishing. We have so much online publishing now that's taking place, so you could really bridge those gaps. The one thing I would suggest is if you are interested in going into publishing, whether it's on the editing end, because there's many types of jobs affiliated with editors, everything from the acquisitions editor to the actual copy or proofer that we often see before these books and go out to print. Do consider, the area that you want to get into, particularly the industries, whether it's a particular publishing site, whether you want to stay in Connecticut, move to New York. So it's probably good to take a look at the landscape of what you're getting into so you could really plan accordingly. Other industries that cross-sect with English would be the marketing industry, public relations, anything with law certainly cross-sects with good solid English argumentative skills and writing skills that are central to all these different occupations. So if I had to give some advice or suggestions in terms of what to consider, it would really be to get some solid advising and to work with your advisors to follow a career path that's going to be manageable for you, not only at Middlesex, but also when you transfer to a four-year institution and pursue English as a possibility, because it's not going to be just English. You could focus it even more. It could be creative writing, it could be journalism with cross-sects with communications, it could be professional writing, which cross-sects with other disciplines as well. That tends to be more magazine or book publishing writing. You certainly can run the gamut and go into public relations work as well. So it's really to plan carefully and to identify the institutions that you think you might like to transfer to, and then work with them on trying to follow the appropriate pathway to get you to your dream job. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Judith de Graffenried. I'm the program coordinator for the art department. That's the fine arts and graphic design program. My background is actually in both commercial and fine art. I'm a painter. I have an MFA in painting, but I worked for 18 years as an illustrator. I never chose the field of illustration. In fact, my original degree was in German. I have an MAT in German. And I was one of those kids who had no idea what I wanted to do because I loved everything. I loved all the arts. It was very hard for me to make this decision, so I'm sure you can relate to that. In my case, I was studying German, and then I went to Germany, of course, to study, and I knew I was talented in art, but I just couldn't narrow it down. I went to Germany, and it just blew my socks away. I mean, I could not believe the gorgeous museums, the gorgeous cities. So I came home from Germany and I told my parents that, I was going to switch my major to art, and that never goes well. So they said, all right, just finish up the degree in German so you can make a living. I said, okay, whatever, because I was, believe it or not, kind of meek back then. Being an illustrator changed all that, by the way. So I finished up and I decided, okay, I really want to do the art, so I did what the parents wanted. I finished up the degree to teach German, but then I went off to, guess what, New York to study art. And here I was, this girl from small town South Carolina, and I said, well, apply to grad school, because I've been doing some portfolio work actually at Indiana University, a great art school. You have to check the schools that fit with me very well. Every art school is different, it has a different philosophy, and I did portfolio prep at Indiana University because it fit. And they sent me to Brooklyn College, which is part of City University of New York, which is a wonderful deal. At City University of New York, you get world-class teachers, but it's dirt cheap. So that worked well for me. So getting back to my story, I went on to New York to study art because I was going to be a fine artist, and I was following my passion. Second week in the city, I met my husband, a New Yorker, a total New Yorker, second week in the city, and turns out he had a degree in graphic design, but he was actually working as an illustrator. And he was working for advertising, and if anybody understands the business of advertising, it's insane, very, very demanding. They want everything yesterday. It's run by account executives who have no comprehension of the actual process of doing something concrete, making art. So in short, he really was struggling to meet the deadlines. So while I was earning my MFA in painting, I was also working with him as an illustrator. And somehow we dated for 3 years, working together as illustrators, and we still got married. And I'm serious about that, because working together in a field is awful. And the field of illustration is very rough. We did get married. We did work as freelance illustrators for 18 years together. And it's a very hard field because there's no consistency. You get the work in. They want the work yesterday. They're very demanding. You're dealing with art directors. and account executives who don't quite understand the process. Also, you're working with clients who cannot express what they want. They have no communication skills, and it's like, I have to anticipate what they're trying to say, what they want. So that was extremely difficult. I think it takes a special skill set to be an illustrator. One is you have to have the temperament to be a mole. You have to be able to work by yourself under extreme conditions and not leave the house. And I could actually do that. My husband was an extreme extrovert, so he did more of the front end dealing with the clients, because he was very good at that. And there's an art to that. You have to anticipate, again, what they want, and you'll have to negotiate prices. Our favorite line when we're trying to negotiate prices, you may want to write this down, is kick it into their part and say, well, what are you looking to spend? You have to read their mind first. So you have to read their mind in terms of how much money they're willing to pay, what do they want? Also, one thing we found was, well, the condition in the field is the sketch is the contract in art. You have a written contract, but there's also that sketch they give, and you have to follow that sketch. And if they make changes, you point to that sketch. That's the contract. Illustration also is, believe it or not, a research field. You may spend more time photographing models or digging up reference pictures. I did a book on the history of aviation. That was fun. I loved it. I was doing all sorts of research. I was writing companies asking for some glamour shots of different planes. I went to the Smithsonian, and they have this big machine there with, back then you put in a slide film and pick out the pictures you want, and you could do that. So I learned very quickly how to find the reference. Either photograph it myself, which meant you need good photography skills, or writing companies, or going to the library. Westport Library has this huge flat file of reference photos. There's also places in New York City where you could rent files of photographs on a given subject. So there's a lot of nuts and bolts. My area was primarily advertising initially, and I was a nuts and bolts illustrator, nothing glamorous. I did these very tight pen and ink pieces called stippling, which was one dot at a time, and very tight, perfect outlines around them, and I did it for mainly reproduction in magazines and newspapers because it reproduces well. I did stuff for John Deere. I did a lot of beer, liquor, because the bottles were beautiful in that technique. And I also did, tampons, adult diapers. I mean, it was really glamorous work. So I got a little tired of it. Also, I have to tell you, I have to backtrack. We did have an agent in New York City. Do I have to cut? 2 minutes. Okay, we had an agent in New York City, and he would give us the work, but agents are notorious because anybody could be an agent and call himself an agent. The agents get 30%, and the agent almost always lied to us about the deadlines, tell us we had more time than we did to get us to take the job. So I'm just, be careful of agents. Also, be careful, I want to go back to say clients about working for free. Clients will tell you, oh, you do this for this amount of money to prove your worth, and then I'll give you more work. Well, that's a scam. There's a lot of scams out there. If I had more time, I would advise you about. What I eventually did is I burned out in the advertising because advertising's rough. So I found myself in publishing, and because I was adjuncting around the state at 5 different schools teaching art, my husband too, because quite frankly, you go crazy when you're in the house by yourself. That's why our graphic design teachers, who are wonderful professionals, need to get out of the house. You will. But I was adjuncting at 5 different schools, and what I found was, I could do something. I could leverage this to be different than everybody else because I had access to all these students. So I thought I could go into publishing English as a second language, because if you look at those textbooks, they want the Asian kid in the yellow shirt, they want the older white lady in the pink dress, and then they want the black kid here. They were very specific in the kinds of people, and it was all ethnicities, all ages, and what shirts. I thought, well, my husband and I are both teaching part-time, so we had access to all these students. So we had our lighting equipment in our basement, and we used to say, well, we shoot students in our basement, because we used to hire the students to come to our studio, and that way we could actually corner the market. We had much greater access to the diversity of people we needed than the other illustrators with whom we were competing. So that worked out. So I ended up going into publishing and doing a lot. I did other things too, but mainly English as a second language textbooks, just because I had access to students, you know, the cheapest raw material you can find. Eventually, I was also painting as a fine artist. I would never give that up. And I was entering these national jury shows, and I'd look to see who's the judge, the juror, because I wanted some critical acclaim with that. You don't just go enter any gallery because anybody, it's like an agent or a gallery. Anybody can say, this is my gallery or I'm an agent. You have to check their credentials. So I always check the credentials of the gallery or the person. And so I was very active as a fine artist, exhibiting based on jurors and who they were. So you have to be very careful about that. I hope I covered all the warnings, the major warnings. Eventually, I was actually invited to apply full-time here when I was adjuncting, and what happened is when I got my full-time gig here, I was no longer a self-employed illustrator. There was like a normalcy to my life because every job as an illustrator, almost everyone required all-nighters. It's very brutal. Here I had normalcy for the first time, so I actually started a family. You know, so like, you know, when you're an illustrator, it's kind of hard because again, they're all-nighters and you have to have that temperament. Some people thrive on that, and my major thing is to tell you, know yourself before you get involved. Am I out? Okay.
Does anyone have any questions for any of the panelists? It's the cookie. If you don't, please fill out the evaluations if you would, and leave them by the cookies while you stuff your pockets. And please help me to thank our panelists.